Hello, welcome to the webinar. I hope you're all doing well. I am trying to figure this out so you have a different screen. Yes. Okay, so obviously we are talking about the screen use and I'm trying to figure out my screen use, so give me 1 second. So where is my PowerPoint? So those who are live and joins, I'm so excited to have you here. I hope you got an email to take a quick survey, and that survey will really help you to figure out what kind of screen use you have. And for the practical purpose of this presentation, I want you to know that we are concentrating on smartphone, and I am addressing all of you, including me, as professionals and careers, moms and dads, and young students, as well as older students who are trying to bring a balance in their lives. So to begin with, you saw it's the smartphone compulsion test that I sent you. If you don't have it after this presentation, do take the survey. I encourage you to not take this right now because, as you know, if you take it right now, you will be multitasking and that will not be that great. So the main idea here is to figure out what is a problem with our screen use, and is this problem really going to interfere with our success and harmony and joy. And lastly, I will say about this survey, the survey, it's a 15-question survey, and make sure that you keep tally or we will send you your results. But it kind of indicates, and I don't want to let the cat out of the bag, but mainly if you have a certain type of usage, which is uh, um, crosses a threshold which may require you to seek help. And I will be honest with you, I was one answer below needing a professional help. So I am one of those people who's struggling. So with that, let's get started with our discussion about why we should be concerned about a balance. So I want to start with my perspective, and I specialize in executive function, and I want to start with three brain networks that really are important for all of us to consider, and that will help you to understand how to think about creating strategies. So in the brain, we have three networks. The first one is called the executive control network. The second one is called the default mode network. And the third one is saliency network. And how does that all matter to us? Is the first one is the executive control network, which is same as the task positive network. And this is the network that we activate to bring attention to the task in hand. This is when we are actually getting work done. This is the network that's activated when we are taking decisions, when we are solving problems, when we are getting seeing something to completion. So for example, I have this image of a whack-a-mole here, which is actually kind of eliminating distractions and hyper focusing your attention on all those things that matter. So it allows you to maintain goals, it allows you to ignore the irrelevant information, and as well as kind of determine in the moment what is distracting you so that you can eliminate distractions and fully pay attention to the task in hand that matters. So executive control network allows you to ask a question: what is it that you're working on? Why does this matter? And are you doing what you're supposed to do? So if the answer is yes to all these three, then the executive control network is activated. This also is the network that overrides the habitual response. That means when you're driving and suddenly a squirrel passes on the road, you have to come to your senses and brake or slow down. That's your executive control network. It also is the root of allowing you to generate a novel response. The next function that this network serves is detecting mistakes and weighing options. So this is a really critical network. This is the network that tells you that you are an evolved human being. The second network, before I talk about the next network, let's talk about the screen use and the task positive network, a specific planned activity that focuses your attention and you stay committed can allow your central executive function to meet the goals that you have in mind, detect your mistakes while you're pursuing those goals, and modify solutions using your screen. So yes, you can activate your task positive network. For example, I produced this PowerPoint for you. This is using the screens to engage my task positive network or executive control network. Uh, the second network is the default mode network. This is, as the picture shows you, is your mind wandering network. This is also called a task negative network. And the most interesting thing about this network is, of course, when your mind begins to wander, you move from your task positive network to your task negative network. Marcus Reschel was the psychologist who discovered that at the brain level, at rest, the brain was more active when it was focused on a task. So he was curious what was happening in this state, and what we know a lot more about the default mode network. And this is an interesting process that several months ago I was listening to Fresh Air, where this a city designer came on talking to Terry Gross, and he was talking about a future of I guess, as we progress in 21st century, the future may be that we may have self-operating cars. And he gave this example that struck a chord with me, because he said currently the lanes on highway are 12 feet, but the car width is only close to 5.5 feet. So why there's extra space on each side is because it's really hard for us to stay in the lane while we are driving, because the default mode network kicks in, and we begin to daydream, and our mind wanders, and we kind of weave in and out. And thankfully, I don't know, some of the modern cars have this built-in kind of a sensor that beeps, or car rattles a little bit when you cross the white line, that telling you that you have entered somebody else's lane. So this is, somebody has become mindful that our capacity to stay between two lines is so hard, because once we know this is a task that requires no thinking, this is an autopilot task, we stop thinking, and task positive network switches to task negative network. And his argument was that once we become quite proficient in designing cars that can operate by themselves, we actually will be able to widen the usage of this 6-lane highway into 12-lane highways, because the cars can be very close to each other, because the machinery will be operating them, not man. So a few characteristics of this default network is it's essential for creativity. It's really essential for remembering past experiences, imagining hypothetical scenarios for the future. And this is the place where we do nonlinear thinking. And it's really why this matters, because think about screen use and task negative network. We often are watching a movie or a show where our mind begins to wander. We see a character's perspective, and that reminds us of something else. Or we are working on, if you're a lawyer and you're working on a case and you see a murder mystery, and you suddenly begin to think, wait a minute, I have an idea, and you begin to make connections. So we can do this kind of downtiming during a not so important work, which is the task positive network switching to task negative network. But during the screen time, people might think that I'm getting bored when I am working on something that I'm working on. And hence, instead of letting the mind wander, you begin to wander in your screens. And that is not task negative network, which the mind wandering allows you to make connections by switching back and forth between Facebook and Twitter and Instagram, and back to Facebook, and then going to LinkedIn, and then coming back to the work that you were doing. That's not necessarily mind wandering. Just wanted to let you know. So the third network is the saliency network. And this network weighs emotional relevance and perceived urgency to allow the switch between task negative network to task positive, or vice versa. So this is kind of a bridging network. This is actually an attentional network. It's an awareness network. It's a meta awareness network. This network pretty much is kind of supervising the supervisor. It's kind of keeping a check on systems. This is also a network that connects your body and mind connected. This is when you get a kind of a feeling, something is not right. You turn your attention back on. So that kind of saliency network kind of sees the big picture of your functioning. So the saliency network has a very important a role in kind of acting like a four-way stop. It facilitates switching between the default mode network and the executive control network. So again, going back to that screen use and saliency network, multitasking is where we are kind of not allowing the saliency network to do a good job for us. We are talking to somebody with the phone on, sure, yeah, keep talking, I can listen to you. That's actually not letting the saliency network to be at its best. Another thing to think about is we may be coming from news, Twitter, Facebook, and transitioning from these places might leave a little residue. And I'm going to talk about this residue, and that can affect your emotions and mental states. So even though you might say, okay, I'm done being on Twitter, I'm done being on Fox or CNN, and I'm switching back to work, but that saliency network is carrying some residue which will not allow you to be your personal best. So that's why. So now let's think about, how does this matter for our screen life balance? And I love this Amishi Zah's quote. She says, attention leads and the rest of the brain follows. But the true question is attention a good leader? And you and I are now may not have ADHD or any diagnosable disorder, but we may have now behaving like somebody with ADHD whose brain to begin with is wired to not sustain effort while paying attention. But excessive screen use can cause you to have a terrible screen use, terrible attention and attention regulation. Hence, you may not be tracking what you should be tracking because of that volatility in your attentional system. So as we think about attention in the age of pandemic, I think we should really frame this from three main perspectives with three networks that I talked about. So this is what I see most critical. And I am a speech and language pathologist. I have a practice. I work with clients. I also have a software that is designed to train attention, decision-making, and this task positive network. And I have framed my thought process. How do we manage this? So this is something I've been thinking about before a pandemic, but pandemic has really got me concerned about my own screen usage. With having all this kind of knowledge, I am falling apart. And so please know that anything and everything I talk about here and give advice, it is not advice I'm successfully able to follow. And practically I'm struggling. And so simply by having to put this workshop together for you has made me so aware of my personal follies, and I promise myself to work better at it. So let's talk about three things I think that really matter to me, and I think you should take a real keen interest in this, is attention fragmentation, addiction, and affective coloring. So these are the three A's that are disrupting our screen life balance. Now, you might be thinking, whoa, Sucheta, addiction, that's a very strong word. I do not have addiction. I do not suffer from addiction. I do not have addiction problems. And I'm just kind of putting it out there. I think you might be wrong. I'm kind of inviting you to be open and think maybe that you are struggling as much as I am. So just with that in mind, let's proceed with attention fragmentation. So think about this rock climber here. The climbing rock requires full awareness of what you're doing. And if you lapse in attention, there's a huge danger. And particularly in this scenario, it's lethal. Now, none of us are doing anything that critical that is going to cause attentional fragmentation. Like this. Sorry, let me say that again. None of us are doing what the rock climber is doing in everyday life. I am not in a position where I am threatened that if I don't pay attention, I am going to die, right? We are not even driving these days. So driving probably would be the one kind of situation where this kind of threat exists, that if I take my eyes off of off of the road, I might actually get into an accident. So think about in your daily life, what is causing this kind of fragmentation, because you have taken it for granted that nothing I'm doing is of risk. Nothing I'm doing is really going to cause me to have a huge crash and burn. So that's why I think it's really, really important. Take a look at this picture, and I think it's an endearing, a cute picture. But an adult is trying to drink a beer, and the little baby is kind of leaping to see if he can get a little sip. Now, you and I, as adults, know this is wrong. We will never let a child drink beer, and let alone a sip, but the entire can of beer or this glass of beer, right? But we are doing that to our brain systems. There's a childlike curiosity in our brain, and there's an adult-like person who's consuming information, and the discretion is that the adult self has to stop the baby or inquisitive brain from indulging. So switching between the essential screen use and non-essential screen use is invisible to naked eye. So you may be, because we have a smartphone that houses all apps, so you may be taking notes, or you may be watching something on your smartphone, and you can switch to Facebook, and you can switch to your emails all in a jiffy. And you might even think that, oh, did I switch already? Was I bored? I was just checking. I didn't have any purpose. Nobody was going to text me or email me, or nobody was going to actually Facebook message me, but I just wanted to check. In fact, Twitter, I don't know if you noticed that Twitter has created this function. When you log into Twitter, the notification doesn't get turned on. They have kind of introduced like a 3 to 7 second delay. So you wait and you wait. And what they're using is this slot machine kind of principles, which is you will not get the reward immediately. So that's going to talk about addiction, but just think about this lack of self-awareness and self-deception practices may be the reasons you may be failing to use discretion as you switch from essential use to non-essential use. So you may be doing something and not even thinking that, oopsie, I did it. So the second part we need to think about is this addiction. So I love this idea that there are addicts and then there are drug dealers, right? So, and I have never smoked even pot in my life. So I'm using this very grave analogy, but I'm not calling ourselves to be thinking about addicts and drug dealers, but in essence, our smart technology or screen usage is very much similar to a behavior of an addict, and there is a drug dealer. So who is the drug dealer? So think about so on an average, Americans are using their smartphones at least for 4 hours a day. And that's a lot. And during a pandemic, I'm suspecting we are using screens far more than 4 hours. So this talks about smartphones, but if you think about collective screens, my screen usage is probably escalated to 8 to 9 hours a day because I work a lot. Using my laptop and my technology. And if you're on your smartphone, they are designed to interrupt your workflow, by the way. And think about practice, right? What you practice is what you get good at. So if you practice being interrupted by your technology and your screen usage, then you're really going to get good at getting interrupted. You don't get good at avoiding the interruptions or stopping the interruption just because you have an alert and you saw it, but you didn't check the alert that showed you some information. So this combining this fragmentation, so attention fragmentation, researchers have found that while working, workers were interrupted with an email ping or a message ping, and it took them longer to return to work after the pinging. So the pinging, whether you switch your attention and check what the message was or check what the email was, doesn't matter. The fact that you got interrupted itself causes fragmentation of attention. And then second part is that the technology is designed to act like a slot machine in your pocket. So technology wants you to stay engaged. The developers are paid for user engagement, and they have spent a lot of their attention and their creativity in designing such that we will stay engaged. And that, going back to my Twitter example, that Twitter now has created a delay and applied the principles of using a slot machine. That means every time you use the slot machine, you do not get the favorable results, but it waits, and sometimes you do and sometimes you don't. So sometimes what they have done is you don't see how many Twitter alerts you have, they have actually used an algorithm where sometimes they show it after 2 second delay, and sometimes they show it to you right away. So thank you for somebody's alert that I'm going really fast or speaking very fast. So I'm going to try and slow down. Thank you for that reminder. So another thing that comes to mind when I think about this, that the tech moguls, take your Bill Gates and Steve Jobs, they, well, I actually, Steve Jobs, when iPads were launched, he was asked, so what do your kids think? And I think his kids were teenagers by then. And he says, absolutely not. They haven't used it yet. And in our house, we have very minimal technology use. Same thing with Bill Gates. So here we are going back to this addicts and the drug dealers. The technology moguls who create this technology for consumption are extremely mindful of their own families. That means they don't deal at home, but they're very happy to deal to addicts. And guess who the addicts are? And I'm sorry to use this strong language, but I really want us to be alerted and jolted by this presentation that no one is spared. And not because we are not good people, but because our systems are so susceptible to attractive interruptions. So now let's talk about the third concern that I have, which is the affective coloring, or also in neuroscience called stickiness. So all of us have inner thoughts, and they are far more influenced by what we are exposed to. And so this is called inner narrative. So I'm a good person. Oh, I have 2 children, a husband. My mom lives with me. I have 2 brothers. This is my biographical information, and my life that I have built around my life experiences, they become my inner life. And my inner life is such that I revisit these factoids about who I am, which is also described as consciousness. And then I also take a little inventory or do a little time travel. That means I go back nostalgically, I look ahead fondly about what's coming up. And this time travel is not seamless as it sounds, because there's something called stickiness. So the stickiness is this affective coloring. So the researchers found, so take this example of Lepate and his colleagues. What they did is they put people in MRI machines, and they showed them these fear faces, faces of people expressing fear. And in one condition, they showed these fear images, one after the other. And at the end, they showed a picture of a person, and a simple question the person was asked: how much do you like this person? Yes. So, of course, in one condition, when they didn't see the fear faces, and second condition, when they saw the fear faces, people, after seeing fear faces, they liked the person less. Okay, so put that information away. Now I'm going to give you a second condition. In second condition, the participants were shown fear faces. However, they were covered by Mondrian paintings. These are abstract paintings, so they were covered. They were laid on top of these fear faces, so they were not in your face, but they were there. They were visible, they were there, but they were not completely processable. Let's put it that way. And so this condition, they called it as not a conscious condition. People were not conscious that they were still exposed to fear faces. And guess what happened? Then they asked the participants, how much do you like this person? And the answer was even less than the previous condition. So why this research is so important, whoopsie, is that research shows that people, when they were unaware that they were exposed to fear faces, their like and dislikes were influenced more negatively than when they were aware. So this switching that we do using technology and screens, it is introducing a very important element called affective coloring. That means we are subjected to invoking negative responses that we have no access to, because we are not even aware that we switched from task positive network to task negative network. And during this task negative network, our mind is wandering as we are wandering through our screens. haplessly getting exposed to a Twitter news. Take simple example of that we have been told that children are immune from COVID-19, right? And then somewhere we just read that, oh my God, the death by the coronavirus in children is on the rise. Now, suddenly, let's say if you have a baby, you are now concerned about this little tidbit of news that came into the horizon and you were made aware of. And then when you switch back to your work, this affective coloring or the stickiness lingers with you. And what does it do? What does it do to your past task positive network engagement? It affects you that your mood is low. It affects you in a way that your enthusiasm for work goes down. It affects you in a way where you feel less eager to complete the task. And you have no awareness why. So you might find that you're in front of the work that you're doing and you're just not finishing it. And you may not be even aware that it's something to do with what you did an hour ago. And that's still lingering with you. So this is really important. Often the example comes to my mind is coffee beans. Those young people who don't even go to a mall for shopping for perfumes. Lord and Taylor, when I was in Boston, we would go through Lord and Taylor, and they would have these amazing spread of perfumes, but they would always keep coffee beans on the counter. So after spraying something, you would smell the coffee beans to wipe out the smell of the previous perfume, and you can be having a fresh palette, so to speak, so that you can have a clear sense of what the next perfume is like. So I feel we need to create some coffee beans for our souls so that the affective coloring impact can be reduced. So that brings me to designing solutions. So I want us to take a neuroscience perspective on well-being. So I'm not really concerned about screens. Don't use it, it's bad, or use it less, or what's wrong with you. No, I want I want us to pursue well-being. And so let's talk a little bit about well-being. What is balance and well-being? So Richard, a famous neuroscientist and contemplative researcher, talks about four components of a framework of well-being, where there are four components that impact one's well-being. One is awareness and meta-awareness. That means awareness of awareness, connections, making connection, insight, that your self-knowledge, and purpose. So I want to frame the solutions that I'm going to propose to you using this framework. And I want you to kind of think about it, not just that it's the screen that requires balance, but maybe all aspects of our lives requires balance. And let's kind of frame our balance, bringing back balance effort through these four components. So he says that well-being is a skill that can be practiced and strengthened. So again, going back to this, the central executive, there has to be an intention to want to do better. And that intention, when you engage, you are actually engaging the supreme brain functions, which is the executive function, which allows you to manage your life's direction, manage your mismanagement, and guide you to take better decisions for yourself. So here's the first suggestion. Use 3 C's to check to instill balance. So these 3 C's are consumption, connectivity, and creativity. So kind of just assess, what am I using my screens for? Am I being a consumer of just hugging information? And most neuroscientists talk about this, that brain is naturally designed to consume. It wants. So it's very hungry for information. So if you put yourself in front of Wikipedia, and I used to work with teenagers, and they often used to have a game, the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon. Instead of that, it was 6 degrees of a Wikipedia. That means you start with a link and you connect back to the same link using 6 steps. Now, of course, this is crazy, but this is how we can keep ourselves busy, by consuming information. So Netflix and Hulu and YouTube and TikTok, all those things that we do as entertainment is consumption. Now, there are some people who actually are also consuming information by reading something informative. They're saying that, you know what, I am not entertaining myself. I'm actually enlightening myself with information. But what I understand from a memory, long-term memory, and forming deep knowledge through deep work, that your consumption should be 10% and 90% should be followed up with introspection or contemplation. So consumption without contemplation is consumption. So yes, you might be on Ask Jeeves or you may be reading something really important, but if there's no built-in time for checking your consumption is taking roots or not, then consumption can be bad. Second is connectivity. So think about connectivity. We are human beings are naturally wired to make social connections. And are we using technology or screens to make connections? So if I meditate with a friend of mine every day, twice a day actually, at 8 o'clock and 4 o'clock. I am using screen to connect, so that's great. Zooming, and I had a girlfriend tell me that she had her birthday celebrated with people on Zoom, and they all toasted her and they sang songs together. That's great. So you can have connectivity. But if you are in front of your screen in isolation and not really connecting, then you may be not using the screens correctly. Now, I do want to point out that I belong to gajillion WhatsApp groups, which is a nightmare. And you might feel actually that you are part of a group, and that is connectivity, but I'm sorry to tell you that is not same as connectivity. Connectivity has to have some component of social emotional relationship. When you read something that somebody has said without facial expressions, without any tone of voice, without any affective feedback, we are really not enriching our lives through connection. And the last part is creativity. So yes, you can use. I use I do a lot of creativity with my technology and screen. So I am in front of that. So so I need to kind of keep a check on it, but maybe self-deception there. But I like to use technology for creation. So I do a lot of creative things, such as creating a new presentation or making modifications to my app, or kind of designing some things as a way to share, like a little booklet. So I do those kinds of things using my apps or my screens. So I'm allowing some creativity there. So to begin with, why don't you measure your screen usage? There's an app called Moment for iPhones and Off Time for Androids. Your iPhone also has a function to check your screen usage. So that may be a good place to begin. Another thing is talking about addiction. You may want to develop some habits and do some urge management. So one of the things that is often recommended is this idea of Catherine Price has written a fantastic book, How to Break Up with Your Phone. I highly recommend that you read that book. A lot of information today came from that book. And she talks about this, sitting this one out. So just writing the craving that you have, craving to touch your phone, pick it up, look something up. Or having multiple tabs open on your screen. Why don't you just stop yourself from using multiple tabs and kind of lock yourself in one window, or to finish up the work that you have? And remove access, such as place your phones in back seat while you're driving. I love this little image that there's a little crocodile in the front seat where your phone is, so that maybe it snaps your fingers. That will be a good and bad kind of solution. But I think I'm officially addicted to my phone when I drive, because it is never in the back seat. So I don't know what I'm telling you about to pursue this strategy. I'm sorry for my hypocrisy. My phone, in fact, is in my lap. In fact, I'm very, very good at driving with one hand, and my phone is in the other. So I'm probably need like massive intervention here, but I'm thinking about it. And not having to drive has been a fantastic solution for my pre-COVID addiction. Second is improve your self-control. Construct concrete rules that work around screen use time. So I love this image of a bowl. Why don't you have a bowl in the middle of your room where everybody deposits their phone before a meal? wheel, or we play cards and we're desperately trying. My son told me this story about Mahatma Gandhi. Once a woman came to Mahatma Gandhi and said, please, Mahatma, tell my son to not eat too much sugar. So he said, okay, why don't you come back after a month? And a month later, she shows up and she said, here, you told me to come back. I'm here. She said, so Mahatma Gandhi looks at the boy and says, young man, stop eating sugar. And she looks at him strangely and says, what was that all about? So he says, well, I really couldn't tell him until I myself stopped eating sugar for a month. So that's very noble of Mahatma Gandhi. This is a constant problem at our house, that when I tell somebody else to not use the phone because we're playing or we're eating, they tell me the same thing back. So yes, I will try and strive to do better, but maybe you can have a bowl so there's no need to tell anybody to do that. Turn off notifications. This can be a lifesaver. Honestly, I have turned off my notifications as we speak. And lastly, maybe turn off your phone setting. Like maybe put your goals on as a screensaver on the front. Make a black and white so it's less appealing and stimulating for you. Make it less attractive. I have my older son had a very broken screen for a long, long time. A screen uh, the screen protector that was broken, and I was curious, why didn't it just replace? I think he said it's just harder to read, so that way I'm less likely to read using my screen. I thought that was a brilliant solution. So think about another very, very important thing which we didn't talk earlier, but I want to weave that, is healthy bedtime routine. I think one of the biggest disruption technology and screens have caused us is to dysregulating the circadian rhythm. As you know, 1 hour before bedtime, the body begins to prepare, the body and inner organs begin to prepare for our sleep. And that process is disrupted by exposure to the screen light. And so we must practice this. I have to again confess, I have not done this. I tried actually in preparation, and it's really, really hard. I just don't know what to do with myself 60 minutes before bedtime. So I am trying 15 minutes before bedtime, but again, this is self-deception at its best, and I'm cheating, as you can see. So sorry. Maybe mute the glow. I went to Venice Biennale for 10 years ago, and there was a very curious exhibit where the artist had created a complete pitch dark room, and the only thing in that room was the lighting that was off of different technology, such as your strip, the power strip having green light, your watch having a light that stays on, or your timer, or your pot having a light. So you walked into this room, and the room was pitch dark, but every gadget that was plugged into the wall was exuding this light. And that just reminded me so much of this incredible missing out that we are creating, that our rooms are not pitch dark, which is the best way to create a wonderful environment to fall asleep. So maybe kind of putting away or putting some tape on the lights in your room, and maybe only having the natural light come in the morning, but maybe turn off everything so that there's some kind of darkness, and allowing you to go into the deep sleep. I love eye pillows. I use that myself. It may be odd for men on this webinar, but don't feel odd. I think that pressure as well as that darkness can be conducive to go into deep REM sleep. And instead of using your cell phone or your smartphone as an alarm, why don't you use actual alarm? That might be actually very helpful as well. Next thing is think about a creative problem solving. So as a family, you need to kind of solve some problems that you can find useful to your own family. And I think I love this idea of a family charge station that needs to be away from the bedroom. So your computer, your laptops, your iPads, and your iPhone. I think if you're officially addicted, which you may be unaware of, you may not feel safe without your phone, because now just take a little quick inventory. My husband is a physician, and he is actually on call. And he is the only person in our house allowed to get calls in the middle of the night because of his job. but even he doesn't get as many calls as all the members of my family have the phones next to them as if they're doctors on call. So there's some kind of taking a little inventory of your practices on a daily basis. Turn off the internet. You know, there are a lot of, particularly those who are raising children, you can create 2 logins and you can get some techno geek come in and do this for you, but you can have the children's internet. They don't have phones yet. You can, it automatically turns off so they cannot get on the internet. And maybe if you yourself are having a problem, you can do that for yourself. And finally, using timers for your apps to that they turn off. It was funny. I have a timer turn off all my apps at 10 o'clock. And then after 10 o'clock, I have to manually make them unturned off. And then they will ask me 15 minutes, 1 hour, or forever. And every night I'm doing 15 minutes and that's not adequate. So then I do hour. So it's just telling me that I'm not practicing what I preach. Now, mind you, I am not preaching. I'm genuinely sharing these ideas with you because I'm struggling. And by having to put this presentation has given me a great perspective on my own habits. So the next thing to think about is strengthen your attention. Switching attention intentionally between task negative and task positive modes in your brain can be really helpful, but it requires incredible finessing. So what does that finessing look like? So much preparation can be done offline. So why don't you use your old-fashioned paper pencil methods to write down what is that you want to work on? So I actually took 6 books for this podcast. I took down notes. I wrote the notes, then dictated the notes in my phone. But I did all that in preparation to putting together the PowerPoint. Now, I'll tell you what happens to me when I am preparing a PowerPoint. To get this man looking at his computer, it took me at least 3 minutes to find this image. Why? Because I obsess about these things. So if I start entire PowerPoint or my webinar preparation by using a slide deck, it'll be a disaster because I will spend a lot of my times in fluff and not really giving myself a break and doing the effortful, meaningful work by diving deep. Second is expand the time when you are doing mental work and that requires effort. Do not switch. Prohibit yourself from switching, and maybe you can recruit help from your family since we are all working from home, or maybe your colleagues in the future. But this effortful diving deep requires uninterrupted time, and I have some framework that I have created based on my experience in last 20 years, that 15 to 20 minutes for kids who are maybe in elementary, middle school, and pre-adolescent and adolescent kids, 25 to 45, and 45 to 60 minutes for adults. So if you are working on a project, that uninterrupted time is really critical, and generously use alarms, physical alarms, by the way, not your phone alarm or not your computer alarm, and do the work offline, as I said. So practice this old-fashioned way to transport your deep dive learning understanding into formulating thought, creating creative solutions. And as I said in the beginning, the default mode network is great at allowing you to connect. So after you do this, which is diving deep, take a break. And take a break that allows you to connect ideas. So taking a walk in your neighborhood, but without phone. So I think I see lots of people on their phones or they're using their headphones. I am guilty again. Why? We feel I don't want to waste a single moment of my life. So going back to this framework of how memory works, how long-term memory, how information is translated from consolidation stage into long-term storage, is that information needs to make deep connection with each other and create something called schemas. And new information needs to go and belong to the pre-existing schemas. That's how we store information in our memory. So in order to do that, we need to see connections between pre-existing information and new information and create some opportunity for us to rehearse. And all that requires uninterrupted attention to details. Now, those who are adults who are not learning new information, they might say, what do I need memory for new information? Because I'm not studying like students are. Well, but if you are a leader and if you're formulating a strategy, if you are a strategist who's offering a new solution, if you are somebody like me who's managing many patients and creating solutions for every student. I need that kind of creativity to see the connection between, oh, that technique had worked with the so and so student that I saw 2 years ago. It may be a good idea for me to try. So this ability to bring something that has worked, ability to connect something that has not worked, can be really, really helpful. So the next thing is to think about is connecting to your purpose. So aligning everyday task with purpose is a really fantastic thing, which is most people in the business of mindfulness are talking about. This intentionality is really the foundation of we having some meaningful joy from what we do. And going back to Richard Davidson's framework of well-being, it's the big picture of well-being is to having purpose in life, where everything you do can be purposefully done, can bring joy. So for example, even making a coffee in the morning, if done with purpose, making sure the counter is clean, making sure you empty out whatever the filter that was used, making sure you use your favorite mug, making sure you take a moment to see the steam rising from the cup. Drinking cup mindfully can bring you so much joy. You don't need to go to therapy for that. You can actually create these moments of personal therapy that allow you to connect with purpose. So you are going to drink coffee. I see this all the time, even in my life and people that I work with, that drinking is done mindlessly. Drinking coffee, it has stopped bringing joy because I'm doing something else. So multitasking is the biggest way we will stay disconnected from our purpose. So make a daily a list of to do, and then break that to do list into hourly to do list. And this is a really critical step, because I think your purpose in the moment may be a minor step that connects to the bigger picture. So that bigger picture you may lose sight, and that minor step may not bring joy. But if you look at that minor step and say, this was my purpose of this hour, that can really allow you to muster up all the courage to stay engaged in that task positive network. Keep your goals visible. Keep them top of the mind, because working memory, holding on to your goals requires working memory, and having to do the work requires working memory. So you're holding on to goals, and then you begin to do, the goals are wiped out. So you need to refresh what the goals are by revisiting those goals that you have, to-do list that you have created, that you have kept in a visible next to you somewhere. Again, I highly recommend write it down, write it down. Next is review your goals and disruptions that you have encountered. And at night, journal and share your observations and talk to people. As I'm talking to you, this itself has helped me so much to externalize my thought process regarding my approach. These are foundational skills for metacognition. That means awareness of your thinking and thinking with awareness. And once you come into that state, only then you can actually keep in linking yourself to the bigger picture. A screen relationship manifesto. So talking about writing down what you want from your technology. I love this idea of manifesto. Ted Kaczynski comes to mind. But how about taking your own ideas about what do's and don'ts I will follow? So maybe something, your manifesto should have some self-imposing rules like no multitasking, no checking screens in the middle of family time or any time of togetherness, no checking screens during meal. And this is my favorite one. No, let me Google that just so that I can look that up. So, because I don't remember. How many of your friends and colleagues and your family has done that, right? Oh my God, I saw this amazing movie. I don't remember. Let me look it up. That has this great character. I don't remember who the actor was. Let me look that up. And it actually showed, it was based on somebody's story. I don't remember who that was. So now what I'm doing, I have exited the conversation and I have gone into my phone, and my smartphone has sucked my attention. So I don't want to do that. So finally, no screens before this and no screens after. That can be part of your manifesto. And also think about no listening privately or something while in a shared time. So have each person in the house has headsets. I love to cook while I'm listening to some podcast, and my family invariably ask me questions, and I find that annoying. So I need to change that for myself. Um, and lastly here, invoke screen-free, high moral emotion. So one of the most amazing emotion is emotion of awe. And this awe is not inspired by watching a video. Somebody doing something amazing can be great, awe-inspiring. But I think what the emotions of empathy, compassion, and deep connectedness requires an outlook. And Richard Davidson, again, describes outlook as the ability to see the positive in others, the ability to savor positive experiences, and the ability to see other human being as a human being who has innate basic goodness. As I said, if you are exposed to too much screen time and too much disruption, the affective coloring can fail you to see the goodness in others. And particularly in the pandemic, we need the opportunity to see goodness in others. And so that brings me to the end of my talk. And here's a summary. Unchecked tools, gadgets, and habits are dangerous. People, I am a walking and talking example of living a dangerous life because often I'm not checking my gadget use and I have tools. So we have this idea that let me download this app. It's so useful. And once you download that app, now you have 23 apps instead of 22, and you have one more tool that was supposed to help you can disrupt you because you don't have good habits. So remember, habits need a check. Your gadgets and tools need a check. And maybe once in a while, just like you take the garbage out, clean out your apps and get rid of them ones that you have not used. If you are obsessively using one all the time, put it on the third screen, which is what I have done, and still doesn't stop me. But at least I'm putting some effort. Next, practice what you preach. If you have these high expectations from your children, your students, that they should be better with their screens, you must do a little inventory of self. Because we all are very, very likely to engage in self-deception because it really hurts to know that you're failing. So part of this idea of creating a better relationship and bringing out balance is to have some acceptance built into it and having some self-forgiveness, because recognizing your own humanity and recognizing that so it's the same thing. You have a goal to lose weight and then you go and buy chips. The moment you buy, in the moment when you're buying the chips, you said, but I'll just use it very carefully. I'll eat it very carefully. And then what you find is that when you're actually eating it, you're not being careful. So then what happens? You're eating it, then you're feeling really angry at yourself. So I think same thing you need to be doing with your technology use. Allow some technology use, screen time, where you're doing nothing but eating brownies and chips, potato chips. Allow some indulgence, please. These are extremely stressful times. We are trying our best to do our best. So many of us are scared for our jobs, our future. So many of us are unsure whether things are going to continue to stay the way they are. Is there going to be something bigger coming around the corner? We don't know. And these stressful times, if we manage our stresses by acknowledging that we are experiencing stress, only then we are likely to engage in a strategy that might be different than just mindless chip eating. So next is deep work requires uninterrupted concentration. And uninterrupted concentration requires a champion of concentration. So is your task positive network, your executive brain, a champion that is nudging you to do deep work? Are you the shallow thinker who is disrupting the desire of that executive brain to want to do deep work? Executive functions allow you to regulate your management of self. And so when you commit to doing uninterrupted work, you are exercising your executive function. The next thing is discover fun in off-screen life. I highly recommend, even Catherine Price recommends, create a list of fun activities that does not require screens and keep that list handy. If you have children, make this list with children and ask them this activity menu can be a great resource for all of you to go to and say, we did this last time, let's try this one. And you can do a technology or screen-based activity that is fun, that doesn't require switching. So yes, you can indulge in watching Law and Order, one whole episode, and that too on Netflix or on Hulu or wherever it's available, without ads, but promise yourself you will not pick up your phone during that time. Promise yourself you will actually watch the show. And those who are like avid fans of Law and Order like I am, you can even know the story arc, so you know the first suspect is never the real killer. So you kind of like say, okay, I know what's going on. And so once you begin to anticipate, you have taken away the mystery of the show, and that is the reason you might be getting bored or wanting to disengage. And what feels good in the moment may not be what is good for you. So this is really, really important, that every time you use screen to bring pleasure or to distract yourself or just to check one quick moment, you are carrying that's you're pulling the lever of the slot machine. And that might really feel good until the slot machine, ta-da, shows you nothing, shows you didn't win. But the brain is so convinced that you didn't win this time. Next time, maybe you'll win. That's the reason you keep looking at your screen, just to see maybe there's a reward waiting at the end. So I would love to say, stay longer and tell you more, but I hope this was useful to all of you. Please reach out to me if you have any questions. Please explore about my ExQ if you would like. And know that you're not alone in your effort to bring joy and infuse this balance in your life. Having to think about balance, I hope you are constantly wanting to bring balance in your life. And you are not wrong to think that my balance is disrupted. And primary reason being COVID and the current pandemic. So have incredible patience, have incredible kindness towards yourself, and have incredible acceptance that you're going to slip sometimes. Lastly, I will say maybe practice Sabbath, practice once a day. Maybe entire evening or a whole Saturday not to use technology. This requires incredible bravery. So I am wishing you the best, that you find all the courage you need, just like I need that courage to find the balance that you're seeking, and enjoy yourself. Okay. I am going to stop. So I'm figuring out how to do that.